CGQ Plus.
All right, we haven't done an episode of Flashback in quite a while. Now, before we get started, for those of you who don't follow the show on social media, we now have stickers, official Classic Gaming Quarterly stickers. And the reason I wanted to do that is, well, for starters, a bunch of people asked me to, but also I just wanted to come up with something that was more affordable and also more available, because these I can send all around the world. It's a little 3-inch vinyl coated sticker, so you can put it on your car, you can put it on like your coffee travel mug, and it should hold up just fine. So if you want to pick up a couple of these, I will leave a link down in the video description of where you can go to get those. Now, the biggest consequence of the fact that we haven't done an episode of Flashback in a while is that I have a pretty big stack of postcards. So the first one here comes from Daryl in Escondido, California. So that's a pretty cool. Escondido is down south, and this says that this is the California Center for the Arts. So that looks pretty cool. Daryl here tells me he was born in '83 and grew up with the NES, so he likes the stories I tell on the show. We got another postcard from William in Taipei City, Taiwan. So if you recall, several episodes ago, he sent us a postcard where the postcard was like artwork out of some kind of comic book or something. I'm sorry, I forgot which one. But so this time he sent us like an actual postcard, like from Taipei. And then I'll try to cover up his address here because he drew Mega Man there. So that's pretty neat. So thank you, William. The next postcard, the person unfortunately did not sign it or give me a return address, so I can't thank you properly, and I can't send you a postcard back. So, as I've said before, if that's an accident, just send me an email and I'll be happy to send you a postcard. I'm especially disappointed because this postcard comes to us all the way from Cambodia. So how awesome is that? And this says that this is the Central Market in, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of the city, sorry, but in Cambodia. So that's pretty awesome. And next here, we've got one from Dave in Floral Park, New York, who sent us a Dragon Warrior postcard. I don't remember if this was before or after I did the episode on Dragon Warrior, so I don't know if Dave was aware that Dragon Warrior is one of my favorite Nintendo games. But very cool anyway. Next one comes from Mickey in Plainsboro, New Jersey, and he sent me a postcard from New Jersey, which is perfect. And he actually sent me a whole letter here. That, obviously I'm not going to read the whole letter here on the air, but Mickey started a YouTube channel called The Mickey Shuffle, and I checked it out, and I was really impressed with it. So basically, it's sort of like a travel show where he takes like day trips to little towns, I guess mostly around New England since he lives there, and just does like a little 5 or 6 minute video about the town. But he goes more into like talking about, historical points of interest and whatnot. And it's just a really well-produced YouTube show. And so if that sounds like something you'd be interested in watching, I suggest you check it out. Just go to YouTube and just do a search for the Mickey Shuffle. Here we've got another international postcard. This one comes from Kazakhstan. Is it Isi or Isi? I'm not sure. Your name is spelled ISI. He goes by Shuto online. And I can't remember if he sent me a postcard before. I know I've answered questions from him on episodes of CGQ&A, but it's just a nice postcard of Kazakhstan. Looks like a beautiful country. Oddly, the first thing I think of when I think of Kazakhstan is Team Astana, the cycling team that Lance Armstrong was on for a while. Next one comes from James in Livingston, Montana. I've been to Montana a few times. Really, really beautiful there. I've only been to Helena. But, if you're an outdoorsy kind of person, Montana is hard to top. Next, we've got Mike from Highlandville, Texas. And I guess that must be near Dallas because he sent us a Dallas postcard. And I don't know, is that really what Dallas, the skyline, looks like at night? I mean, obviously, whoever took that picture boosted the saturation to 11. But either way, I mean, that looks pretty awesome. I've never been to Texas, and I would like to go at some point. That would be cool. Next, we have Michael from Harrisville, Utah, and he just sent us a postcard from Utah. He wrote on the postcard, he said, CGQ Plus is something very special. Your stories bring joy to me in a time when the world sometimes has little love and joy. And sadly, that's true. And if anybody can get a little love and joy out of watching my show, then that's pretty awesome. So thank you. Next, Dino in, I don't know, do you say, it's West Warwick. So is it Warwick or do you guys say Warwick? Like, I always just say Warwick only because, like, British people say Warwick, and so, like, Derek Warwick, the F1 driver. But I don't know how people usually pronounce that here in the U.S. So he sent us this postcard from Rhode Island. And, it's just got a bunch of, like, little, landmarks from Rhode Island. And that's pretty cool. But then if you flip it over to the back, let me make sure I cover his address. I didn't know this, that Rhode Island is the home of Hasbro, which, of course, is who made Transformers. So they stuck that on the back. And how awesome is that? So I loved Transformers when I was a kid. So thank you, Dino. Next one comes from Leaf or Leif. I don't know how you prefer to pronounce your name, from Chicago. And he's got just the postcard there is of the loop. I believe that's like a, neon stylized version of the map of the L. And then he puts on the back, he quoted me, he put weekend rental at best, which people don't like that I say that sometimes, but I love it. Next, we have Matt from Montgomery, Alabama, who, for whatever reason, sent me a postcard from Alaska, but that's awesome. I've never been to Alabama. I have been to Alaska, and it's quite beautiful there. And it's a Sierra Club postcard, so hopefully it helped support them. This was kind of an odd postcard. The person didn't put their name, they just gave me their address. And it's just got Sissy Spacek, the actress, on the postcard. And the postcard is from 1981, so that's pretty cool. And the other thing I just thought was cool is that this postcard was actually printed here in the Sacramento area. And so it somehow made it all the way to Athol, Massachusetts is where this person is. So when I responded to this postcard, I just addressed it to not Sissy Spacek, because I think we can both agree that probably isn't from Sissy Spacek. Next one, again, no name. They just said it's from JFC Consultants. So I don't know what this person's actual name is, and it's just a postcard from Canada. Pretty neat postcard. It just says best wishes. And I don't know if it kind of looks Christmassy. I don't know if that's supposed to be a Christmas thing. And then you can see that he added a sticker of the Nintendo. Well, it's not the seal of quality anymore. Now it's just the official Nintendo licensed product seal. Second to last, I don't know, a week or two ago, I got a small package from a friend of the show, Derek from Mauston, Wisconsin, who he wrote me a little letter, and then he sent me this Mega Man 2 like refrigerator magnet that he said that he just got off of Etsy and thought it was cool. And I think it's really cool. It's a really nice printing job on there. It's not blurry or anything. It's just, the box art from Mega Man 2, which is, I think, most people's favorite Mega Man game, not everybody's. Certainly my favorite Mega Man game and one of my favorite Nintendo games. And then I did save the best for last. This one really blew me away. This comes from Conrad, who is now in Austin, Texas. Now, Conrad was the first fan of the show that I ever met in person. And there was this thing called the Davis Atari Party. And I mentioned on social media I was going, and he ended up coming and hanging out with me for a couple of years. And he ended up hanging out with me for a couple of hours and was just a really cool guy. And I was kind of surprised when I did the little get together with the My Life in Gaming guys, whenever that was, like last month, I forgot. And when he didn't show up, I'm not going to say I was disappointed, but I was hoping to see Conrad again. It turns out it's because he moved to Texas, so that's why he wasn't there. So he sent us this postcard from Texas, and he wrote me a very nice note, but to me at least, the coolest part about it is the drawing. That I'm highly impressed. That's a very good drawing, and probably a little more accurate than it is flattering, I would say. That's one of my shirts. In fact, that's the shirt that I wore the last couple times I live streamed. And you got the hat right. And then you notice, I'm holding a copy of Mortal Kombat. And then so you can kind of see I'm sort of making a stinky face just because, I don't like Mortal Kombat, as I've said many times. So Conrad, that is an awesome, awesome postcard. And thank you so much. I already scanned the artwork and so that I can maybe use it for something else. Just I thought it was so cool. That's it for postcards. As I always say, if you would like to get a Classic Gaming Quarterly postcard sent to you. All you have to do is send a postcard into the show, and the address to do that will be in the video description. So, before we get into the main topic, today is Friday, and it's the end of what is, for most kids here in the U.S., the first week of school. And whenever that comes around, even though obviously I'm, old and I'm not in school anymore, it really kind of mentally takes me back to the first days of school of my childhood. Just because, it was one of the most important days of the year as a kid, whether for a good reason or a bad reason. In a lot of ways, I would say that the first day of school was like the real New Year's Day for kids, because really that was the beginning of your year. I mean, the whole kid calendar really was based around the school year. So the first day of school was like day one of your year. And then the last day of summer, of course, was day 365. And, for as much as I think kids love summer vacation and kids maybe don't like school that much, speaking for myself, I always kind of liked the first day of school. Like, even when I was in high school, and I hated school when I was in high school about as much as it's possible to hate school. But, something would happen over the course of the summer, and I don't know if this is universally true or if it's just my personality, but as time goes by, it's like you forget the bad things and you remember the good things. And I think maybe in the same way, having that 3 months off for summer, I would kind of forget all the things I hate about school, because there were a lot of good things about school that I would miss. Like for me personally, I'm kind of a creature of habit and a creature of routine. And so I really like having a routine, like I want to get up every day and have somewhere to go. And I want to have like a weekly routine, because like I want Mondays and Tuesdays to feel like crap, because I want the excitement of Thursday if it's almost Friday. And then, and then it is Friday. Like today, as I'm recording this, it's Friday at 3:20. And so that's awesome. And not only is this Friday, it's the Friday of a 3-day weekend, but every day has a feel when you have a routine. And when that routine is gone, it doesn't have a feel anymore. And in fact, that's one of the things I didn't like about my old job, is I didn't really have a routine anymore. Like a Friday wasn't really a Friday, and a Monday wasn't really a Monday. And I missed having that. You need the lows in order to have the highs. And, when it's summer, you don't really have to get up and go anywhere, or if it's a Friday in the summer, who cares? Or if it's a Saturday, who cares? If it's a Sunday, who cares? And, I would miss that. And so I would like, going back to school, because I would settle back into that routine. And, of course, fall, all the new shows would start on TV. And, I was a pretty big TV watcher when I was a kid. And so I would look forward to that. And, I would also really be filled with optimism about the coming school year, because I was not a good student when I was a kid. I really wasn't a good student until I got to graduate school, if I'm being really honest. So, but so every year, I would scrape by the skin of my teeth. And then at the beginning of the next year, I'd say, okay, now I'm going to buckle down and I'm going to do a good job. And I would do a good job for about the first week. And then I would settle back into just, doing what I normally do, just being me. And also by that time, I would say that the newness of being back in school would kind of wear off and I would start kind of hating it again. But, lastly, talking about school, when you're a kid, I mean, not even just when you're a kid, I would say, but whether you're a kid in school or you're an adult with a job, 90% of your social interaction happens at those places. And so like for me, when summer came around, I had a much smaller group of friends that I would hang out with during the summer. Like we'd go ride bikes, or I'd go swim at their house, or et cetera, et cetera. But that was nothing compared to all the people you would see at school, and it's no different having a job, right? Like there are plenty of people at my job who I enjoy interacting with and seeing every day, but they're not people that I spend time with outside of work. So, if you stayed home for 3 months straight and didn't see any of those people, then certainly you would look forward to being able to see them all again and catch up with them. And so definitely, when you're a kid, your whole social universe really is at school. because that's the only chance to be around like large groups of your peers. So I definitely looked forward to that too. So, and of course, if school was starting, if you were lucky, you'd probably go out, you get like some new clothes, like some school clothes, and maybe a new pair of shoes and a new backpack. And it just felt like a new beginning, right? It was a whole new year for you. And it was just a cool feeling. And so even now as an adult, obviously I don't go through that kind of stuff anymore, but, I've got a school in my neighborhood, as probably most people do. And so I see the kids all trotting off to school in the morning, starting this week. And it just sort of takes me back to that time. For me, I think the fall is probably the time that I get most nostalgic about because of school starting and because of like the trifecta, as I may have said before, of holidays of like Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas, which I thought were just the three best holidays. But today we're talking about me first getting one of the game systems that I had as a kid. Now, around this time, the fall of 1989, I just started junior high school, which we talked about in the last episode. And at some point, probably sometime in September or October, I remember talking to some kid at school, like on the playground or whatnot, and him telling me that Nintendo had come out with this little handheld video game where you could interchange the games. Like you could buy different cartridges and put them in there. And I remember thinking like, that doesn't sound like a thing that exists. I kind of didn't believe him. And maybe that sounds kind of silly, but, two things you have to remember. One, I wasn't super plugged in to like, video gaming news. Like I didn't read any magazines. And of course, there was no internet back then. And the other thing is that back then, there would always be all these rumors of, gaming related rumors that were, not true. Like everybody knew somebody who had jumped over the flagpole in Super Mario Brothers, right? Or everybody knew somebody who shot the dog in Duck Hunt, right? But those aren't like true. And not just that, I mean, kids in general, at least when I was a kid, are just like BS artists. And so when someone's like, oh yeah, there's this little mini Nintendo and you can put different cartridges in it, I was like, I don't really believe you, because to me, when I thought of handheld games at the time, it was like the Nintendo Game & Watch games and the little Tiger electronic handheld games. And so I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't think that's a thing, but whatever. Because maybe he was just trying to trick me and make me believe him. Then, oh, you're stupid, whatever. So, and I don't even remember who that kid was. But at some point after that, I ended up making a trip for whatever reason to Toys R Us. And lo and behold, what do they have in like a little display case is a Nintendo Game Boy with, probably some games. And if I remember correctly, I don't think you could play it. I think the whole thing was just like behind some plexiglass or whatnot. But that's when I saw it and was just like, whoa, the Game Boy that is a real thing, what the kid was telling me about. And as soon as I saw it, I wanted it. I'm like, that's what I want for Christmas is a Game Boy. And so immediately, and this was, again, it was probably like, September, October. It wasn't really even that close to Christmas, but I had just made up my mind that that's what I want for Christmas this year. And so I already started like chipping away at my dad. Now remember, by this time I wasn't living with my dad anymore, but if anybody was going to be able to buy me something that was going to be like $100, it was going to be my dad and not my mom. Although I guess I could have asked my grandma. Maybe she wasn't. I never got video games from my grandma, so I wonder if maybe she was just not going to buy me video games. But so I started chipping away at my dad and saying, yeah, this is what I want. And he's like, okay, well, we'll see. And then I remember him coming back to me later. In fact, I remember we were in the car going somewhere, and I remember him telling me, we talked about it, and I'm not getting you a Game Boy for Christmas. We just bought you that Nintendo 2 years ago. Remember, I got my NES in 1987, and he's like, you just got that, and so I think he just was trying to not buy me something that expensive, which is understandable. But there really wasn't anything else that I wanted, and I think I've sort of told a version of this story, like maybe in a magazine read through or something. But there was really nothing else that I wanted, and so when he was telling me, he's like, well, you should think of something else you want because we're not getting you the Game Boy. And I was like, well, I'll think about it, but I really want the Game Boy. And I ended up never asking for anything else. And, so Christmas time rolls around. It's like Christmas vacation. And even though I live with my mom, I usually went and spent Christmases with my dad until he passed away. And, because he wanted me for, as much time during vacation. So I would still go there a lot during the summer. And then if it was like, Christmas or spring break, usually I'd go spend it with him. We weren't one of those families where everything would show up under the tree sometime during the night, Christmas Eve. Like they would just start wrapping stuff and throwing it under the tree, I don't know, the week before or just whenever. I think, I wish I hadn't done this, but I think a lot of kids did this, once ostensibly all of my presents were under the tree, I peeked. And not, when you're a kid and there's something you really want for Christmas, it's almost like stressful because you just have to know, like I need to know if I got the thing that I asked for. And so whether it was knowing where your parents stashed your presents before they wrapped them and put them under the tree, or it was, like carefully cutting the tape on your present and checking it out and then, putting it back together or whatever, a lot of us did that. And like, I think that was a habit I picked up from Jonathan because like Jonathan knew where his parents kept the presents because I think they might not have put them under the tree until Christmas Eve. But he always knew what he was getting because he would just, before his parents got home, he would just go look. Come Christmas morning, I unwrap my Game Boy and, then I have to act excited and, of course, or act surprised. I was excited, but I think that they could tell from my reaction that I already knew that I had gotten it. Because, I don't know. I don't remember enough. I seem to remember my dad saying, "Oh, you peeked, didn't you?" Because, either that or maybe he was expecting me to have like a stronger reaction because he thought he had done a really good job of convincing me that I wasn't going to be getting the Game Boy. But, obviously I was thrilled to have it. And, of course, the Game Boy at the time came with batteries. And so you got everything you needed in the box because, of course, it came with Tetris. It came with even some little earbuds and it came with batteries. So, you could fire it right up and start playing. Now, on this particular Christmas, we were going to spend the day at my aunt and uncle's house, which was over a 2-hour drive away. So for me, I was just like perfect. Like as a kid, normally I wouldn't look forward to long drives. I don't want to sit in the back seat for 2 or 3 hours getting car sick or whatever. But on this particular morning, I was like, well, I'm going to sit back there and play the Game Boy the entire time, especially since it has these headphones. So we pile into the car and, I guess my sister must have been sitting next to me in the back seat. I don't even remember. I just remember sitting back there playing the Game Boy. That was the first time I had ever had a pair of earbuds. Like, cause, back then most earphones were the over the head kind that would either stick in your ear or just sit over your ear, like with foam pads or whatever. And for the first time I had these earbuds, which I remember they kind of hurt my ears a little bit. But, I sat in the back of that car and played Tetris the whole way there. And I remember it making me car sick. Like I personally get car sick kind of easily. Like I can't read in the car. I'd have to kind of take breaks and kind of look out the window for a while because I'd be feeling nauseous or getting a headache or whatever. But then I would try to get back down to playing the game. And, we get to my aunt and uncle's house and, I've got like cousins there, like my cousin Kurt was there. And, I really only brought the Game Boy so I could play it in the car. So I remember that I left it in the car just because I didn't want to bring it in and have other kids like messing with it. Like I was very happy that I got this Game Boy and I really didn't want anybody else messing with it. So, I left it in the car. Just thinking that I was going to play with my cousins the way that I normally did. We would go outside and screw around, ride bikes or play catch or whatever we did. And I just remember my cousin Kurt, I think he asked what I got for Christmas and I told him. And I guess I must have mentioned to him that it was out in the car. And so that's all he wanted to do the entire day. Like, Tetris, let's play some more Tetris. And it's like, I didn't want to. Like, first of all, I just didn't want somebody else messing with my stuff. I was probably being a little bit selfish and didn't want to share, but I also just didn't want somebody else's like grubby little hands all over my brand new Game Boy. But also, like, I just wanted us to play like we normally did, because I normally didn't get to see my cousins. And so I don't really want to sit there and watch you play video games for the whole day or whatever. I don't remember why, but my mom and my grandma hadn't gotten me my Christmas presents yet. Like, for some reason, and that might have been something that I wanted. Like, maybe I wanted to see whether or not I was getting the Game Boy first. Because I didn't know that until I went up to my dad's house. And so by the time I came back, that might have been when I decided, okay, now I know what I want for Christmas from my mom and my grandma. I want more Game Boy games. And so I remember that I came home and I didn't get any games from my grandma. I don't remember why. I don't know if I asked her and she said, I'm not buying you video games, or what the deal was. But my recollection was that I got the Black Monarch's Castle from my grandma for Christmas that year, the Lego set. I definitely didn't get any games. And the other game that I got that to this day I still love is Super Mario Land. And, a lot of people don't really like this game that much. It's a lot different than the other Super Mario Brothers games. And, I feel like by now most people probably know this, but Super Mario Land was one of the only, if not the only, Super Mario games not to be designed by Shigeru Miyamoto. And from what people say, that's because the executives at Nintendo weren't really sold on the Game Boy being that popular, and I don't think they really wanted Miyamoto being distracted trying to make games for it. So if you look at like all of the launch games for the Game Boy, they were all designed by Gunpei Yokoi and his team. And that includes Super Mario Land. So the game's got a little bit of a different flavor to it. And in a way, Nintendo wasn't totally wrong. In the early days, the Game Boy really wasn't that popular. I was the only kid who had one. I got back to school and, I wanted to be cool and have it, early. But then nobody else had one. And moreover, nobody else, for the most part, really thought it was that cool. It was okay, but it's not like I went back to school and was like, hey guys, I got a Game Boy for Christmas. And everybody was just like, ooh. It was just like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of cool. There were no like games for it that people really felt like they had to have. I mean, obviously Pokemon games were still like way off. And so the Game Boy kind of got off to a slow start. And so like, for instance, I never like traded Game Boy games with anybody at school. There was really nobody to talk about Game Boy games with, as there was for Nintendo games. And at least for me, it kind of stayed that way. By the time things like Pokemon games came out, I wasn't really playing with my Game Boy anymore. And in fact, my Game Boy broke at some point. I don't even know what happened. I literally took it down off the shelf one day to play it. And the screen, there was no picture on the screen. You could turn it on and you could hear the sound, but there was no picture, and you could play with the contrast wheel until you were blue in the face and there would just be no picture. That was a few years later. It was not like it happened right away, but, I had a small stack of Game Boy games, by the time it broke. So, I got my bit of fun out of it. And there's some more games that we'll talk about that I got later. But I kind of wanted to go through a little bit of Super Mario Land, so I just figured maybe let's move down to the basement, and I'm going to fire up my Super Game Boy on my Super Nintendo, and we can check out a little bit of gameplay. So that was kind of a little bit of a rough cut there at the end, and the reason for that is that I said something that was wrong, and it's a good example of how, people will swear up and down that they had a certain game at a certain time. Like somebody might say like, oh, I know I got a Sega Genesis on launch day, and I know that because it was also my birthday, and I know that I had Alex Kidd like on that day, and so they'll want to argue that that was a launch game. And basically the same thing just happened to me, where I always, in my memory has always been that I had Solar Striker that Christmas, the Christmas of '89, but for some reason it just wasn't sitting right with me. But I just talked about it in, the first part of this video, but something didn't sound right to me, and I went and looked it up, and it turns out that Solar Striker didn't come out until February of 1990. So there's no way that I had that game. So what that basically means is that, because I looked at all the other games that were available by like early January of 1990, and I didn't have any of them except for Tetris and Super Mario Land. So whatever other games I got later. So so I had to edit the video quite a bit to take out, you know, the parts where I talked about Solar Striker. But so anyway, now we're down here in the basement. And for those of you who subscribe to the channel but skip the live streams, which, you know, I understand if that's not your thing, this is like the little layout and whatnot that I use when I do live streams, which I'm trying to do more often now, now that I have this nice basement setup. So we're down here. I've got my Super Nintendo hooked up to an upscaler, and then that's coming into the software here. And I've just got my Super Game Boy cartridge, or whatever you want to call it, adapter, stuck in the Super Nintendo. And I've just got both of my cartridges down here. Obviously, you can see that we've got Tetris on the screen, and then I've also got my Super Mario Land cartridge. You know, originally I think I said I wasn't going to play I wasn't going to show Tetris footage because who wants to see that? But then at the same time, like, how can we not play at least a little bit of Tetris? So I've got that loaded up, and then I picked the color scheme on the Super Game Boy that, to me at least, seems like it most closely matches the original Game Boy screen, sort of that cooked spinach green screen that it had. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started, and we'll just play this game for a little while. I just felt like I couldn't completely ignore it, just because that's no fun. And so game type A we'll choose. And, you know, I usually picked music type A, which is the stereotypical Tetris music that everybody is the most familiar with. Although, in my opinion, all the music in this game is really cool. And one thing that I kind of forgot to mention in the first part of this video was, you know, the Game Boy came with those earbuds, as I said. But at least in my opinion, I think part of the reason that they chose to include those with the system is that unlike the NES, the Game Boy was capable of stereo sound. And the stereo, I guess, would you call that imaging? I'm not really a sound guy. Of a lot of the music in some of these games was really, really good. But of course, the Game Boy only had a monaural speaker built into the hardware. So the only way you were going to hear anything in stereo was through the earbuds. So I think that, you know, I mean, it makes sense that, you know, you'd want to have, you know, earbuds when you were playing with this, you know, like if you were on a car trip, like what I was talking about. You wouldn't want to be relying on the speaker because it wasn't going to sound as good, and it was probably going to annoy your parents as well. But I think it had the side effect of also really showing off the audio capabilities of the Game Boy. And, you know, in some ways it wasn't as good as the NES as far as maybe some of the voices that it had or whatever. But the fact that it had the stereo sound was, I think, a pretty big step up. And, you know, one of the other things I was thinking about, you know, we really didn't talk about the hardware that much and talk about the screen. And I've actually got my Game Boy right here. Although this is not my original Game Boy because, as I said, that one broke. But, you know, the screen on the Game Boy is pretty bad. You know, it's got a lot of sort of ghosting or blurring when you move. And, of course, it's not backlit. And like I said, it's sort of this spinach green. But, you know, when I was a kid, you know, we didn't care. Like, I thought, when I got my Game Boy, I really felt like now I had like this cutting edge piece of technology or whatever. And, you know, you just got used to playing it like under a light. Like I've got this light right here. And, you know, you would just play it under that. Or, of course, you could buy the light, you know, accessories for it. And some of those were like ridiculously huge. But for whatever reason, I never got one of those. And I don't think I ever really wanted one. I just got used to playing it under a light, like I said. And in fact, I used to sit, most commonly, I would sit at our dining room table because it had a really nice overhead light, as probably do most dining room tables. And I used to just play it there. And in fact, I've got like a really strong memory of sitting at that table and playing Super Mario Land quite a bit. You know, once I got Super Mario Land, which I got, you know, I'm going to say something along the lines of a week or two after I got Tetris here, I definitely played quite a bit of that game. I really liked Super Mario Land a lot. I know, again, and I think I mentioned this already, but I know some people don't like it that much, and it is quite a bit different. But I like Tetris a lot too. I mean, Tetris, you know, was, you know, the most popular game on the Game Boy, I guess. Although, you know, it's kind of dishonest to say that, because it came with the Game Boy. So everybody had a copy of Tetris until finally they started selling the Game Boy without a pack-in game. And I think they dropped the price to, like, you know, something like $50. But so Tetris here was a game that I played quite a bit. I had never played Tetris in any way until I got my Game Boy. Like, I think I only learned what Tetris was probably from seeing Game Boy commercials on television. So, like, I know, you know, Tetris was an arcade game. I mean, obviously, you know, there's the history of Tetris, right? It was developed in the Soviet Union, but I'm saying, like, from an American perspective, you know, Atari got the rights to distribute Tetris here in the U.S. As an arcade game. It was also a popular computer game. In fact, I have Tetris for the Apple II now, but I didn't have an Apple II when I was a kid. So for me, my first exposure to Tetris was this Game Boy version of it. And I definitely loved it. You know, obviously I got other Game Boy games that, you know, I would bounce back and forth playing some of those. But, you know, a lot of times with games back in the day, you know, you'd get a game and you'd like it for a while and you'd play it, and then you were kind of done with it. But Tetris was the kind of game that you always kind of kept around. Like, you know, if I was traveling somewhere and I wanted to bring just a few Game Boy games with me, like, I had a case for my Game Boy, like it was just like a little soft case. It wasn't like one of these big, you know, hard shell suitcase things. I just had some kind of little soft shell case. And so you couldn't bring too many games with you. But, you know, Tetris was always one of the games that I would make sure that I had. So, you know, that was the kind of replayability that Tetris had, made it so that it was the kind of game that you would always want to have with you. Whereas with some other games, you know, it's like you'd get sick of those and you wouldn't really want to play them anymore. So, talking also about, you know, I mentioned the popularity of the Game Boy and how, you know, it really, at least around, you know, where I grew up, and I'm sure somebody else can chime in and maybe disagree. Things are going south quickly here. Trying to talk while I'm playing, you know. You know, so at least for me, it just wasn't a popular system where I grew up. And like, so for instance, Jonathan, you know, for all of the Nintendo games that Jonathan had, well, this will give us a little bit of relief, I guess. For all the Nintendo games that Jonathan had and whatnot, and how, you know, I don't like to say that he was spoiled, because he wasn't, you know, that carries with it a negative connotation that I think at least as doesn't apply to him. But he never had a Game Boy for as long as I knew him. And he was sort of an example. You know, I mentioned that, you know, I kind of came back to school after that Christmas and, you know, had my Game Boy and like, you know, I mentioned that nobody was really that interested or nobody was impressed. I shouldn't have put that there. Nobody was impressed that I had a Game Boy. And, you know, Jonathan was kind of the same way. Like, it's not like he was being bratty, like he was jealous or something. It was just like, he just wasn't interested. And the same was true of a lot of kids. But he did end up getting Tetris, and I meant to look it up and I forgot to look up when Tetris came out on the NES, because that was the version that he had. Because, like, you know, my memory is that it came out on the NES maybe, you know, by Christmas of '89. But, you know, what did we just get done saying about how, you know, faulty memory can be? And, you know, for all I know, I could be way off saying that. But he did end up, whenever it came out, he ended up getting Tetris on the Game Boy. And I remember that, like, you know, I used to go to his house and watch him play, just because, you know, as was the case with most games, he was good at Tetris. And so, you know, I enjoyed watching him play and trying to pick up pointers by doing so. So, I'm not really sure what else I really want to say about this game, so I don't know, maybe we can just go ahead and move on to... That was slop. Go ahead and move on to Super Mario Land. I mean, we kind of recovered a little bit, and well, actually, here, now I'm going to get another Tetris here. Obviously, I made that one mistake right there. That's pretty ugly. Not really sure what we can do about that. But that's one of the things I really love about this game, actually, is you can get yourself, pretty deep into it. And, at least in the earlier levels here, when the pieces aren't like raining down like nobody's business, you can dig yourself back out. And to me, that's kind of part of the fun. And I think the developers must have known that, because of course, if you play the game in mode B or whatever, that's basically what you have to deal with, is you already have a bunch of random pieces in your stack that are basically just in your way, and you have to clear them out. And that just provides a whole different level of challenge that I think is cool. Okay, so now we've got Super Mario Land here going in teaser mode. And I'm not going to try to play through the whole game or anything, but I kind of wanted to get through the first 2 worlds. Just because I think there's some kind of cool, like this Super Mario Land has like some shooter levels in it. And I think that's pretty cool, because at least that I can think of, that I can't think of any other instance of a Super Mario Brothers game having a shooter level off the top of my head. And maybe there's something obvious that I'm forgetting about. But, the game, obviously it's got a little bit of a different look. It's got a very rudimentary look to it. Because this was such an early game on the Game Boy, and like I talked about, it was not developed by Shigeru Miyamoto's team. But it's not a bad game. Probably the hardest thing to get used to with this game is the controls just feel a little bit different. Like, Mario's physics are definitely off compared to the NES titles, which, it makes the game feel a little bit different, and that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but I would definitely say that, that the physics don't feel as good. So, if I'm being honest, it's sort of something in the negative column for this game, and it's just something that you have to kind of get used to. And, obviously the graphics are a lot simpler, as I said, and I don't know if it was just a matter of the developers just needing some time to get their head around developing for the Game Boy, because, if you look at like the later games on the Game Boy, even Super Mario Land 2, which was I think it was called 6 Golden Coins, looks way better than this game. But one of the standout features, at least for me for this game, is that the music sounds really good. And that goes back to what I was just saying a few minutes ago about the Game Boy actually having pretty good sound hardware in it, in my opinion. And maybe that's why it's popular with like these, circuit bending people and chiptunes people. I don't really know anything about that kind of stuff, so I mean, I don't really have an opinion. But like I said, I don't know if that's a consequence of the fact that the system has pretty good musical capabilities. And I was also talking about the stereo sound, and I think this game also does a really good job with the stereo sound, especially the music that plays when you like go down one of the pipes, and you're sort of underground, in that, I don't know, coin bonus area or whatever you want to call it. Sounds really good because it keeps bouncing around between the left and the right channel. So I'll try to get down into one of those areas, and then I'll just shut up and turn up the volume on the music so that you can hear it. It's kind of, I've noticed, now I'm playing it with the sound basically off, just because I don't want it to come bleeding through the microphone. And for some reason, I find the game harder to play without the music or sound effects. So, the other thing you notice in this game is that the levels kind of have more of a theme to them than they do in Super Mario Brothers. Now, of course, when this game came out, it was I guess that would be the third game, right? Because when this game came out, Super Mario Brothers 2 should have already been out. That came out in '88. So this was, for most people, this would have been the third Super Mario Brothers game that they played. At least that was the case for me. And but the levels here have themes, like you can see just based on the background imagery that we're in sort of this Egyptian theme with the outlines of the pyramids in the background. One thing I didn't mention here, there's 2 doors at the end of each level so you can get out. And generally, there's a little bit of a challenge involved in getting into that upper door, and that's what gives you access to this bonus game where you can pick up extra lives. And this game really gives you extra lives like nobody's business. So, and that makes the game pretty easy. Although that was a common thing, I think, with a lot of Super Mario Brothers games, is they would be pretty generous with the extra lives. So now, we still have the, we still have the Egyptian theme going on. You can see like the hieroglyphics in the background. But, now we're underground, and that's because this is like the third and final stage of this world. In Super Mario Brothers, there were 4 stages in each world, but here there's only 3. So my point is that this stage is going to culminate in a boss battle, which will be much easier if I'm fully powered up. Now, for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe partially it was just because of graphical considerations. Here you don't get the fire flower. I don't know what you call this flower. I could look it up in the manual, but instead of having fireballs, you have just these like bouncy balls, and it's kind of cool because they actually bounce off of the walls and ceilings, and you can also use them to collect coins. And there's certain places where you have to do that because there's coins that you can't reach on your own. So here is the boss of the first level. He's sort of this Sphinx-looking guy. And if you don't have whatever these balls are called, then you have no choice but to either run underneath them or jump over them, which is exactly how it works in the original Super Mario Brothers. You can't kill Bowser if you don't have the fire flower. And then you go to the end here and you go through this door. It's just like the end of a Super Mario Brothers level. Then we'll go in here and you'll see Daisy, but it's not really Daisy, much like Super Mario Brothers. Yeah, see, she turns into some kind of enemy and then hops away. So, whatever. And then as you'll see coming up right here, you always get a bonus game at the end of every world. You don't get them at the end of each stage unless you get up into that higher door. So now you can see. I don't know what the theme of this level is, because you've got, ostensibly you've beamed down out of this UFO. But then other than that, it's just sort of this marine type theme, which looks very similar to one of the worlds in Super Mario World. But, obviously this game predates Super Mario World by, I don't know, maybe like a year and a half or whatever. I don't remember when Super Mario World came out in Japan. So this is a pipe that we can go down. So I'm going to shut up while I'm down there so that I can bring up the volume of the game. And hopefully if you're wearing earphones or something, you'll be able to hear that cool stereo. Okay, so the other thing you notice is that in this game, when you go down into those little underground coin bonus areas, there's way more coins. So not only can you get lots of extra lives by making it to all those bonus levels at the end of each stage, but if you find all the pipes that you can go down and get more coins, then you can get a lot more extra lives that way. So you can see, like, I've already got 12 extra lives, which is kind of a lot considering that we're only in World 2-1. I haven't beaten this game in quite some time. I want to say this game has 4 worlds, but I might be off by 1. But it's a short game, and like I said, I'm not going to play through the whole game, but I just wanted to get to the last stage of this world, because I just wanted to show you guys that shooter area. First, I want to see if I can get this. There's an extra life here, but I have to like jump over onto this thing to grab it. There we go. So I wanted to be able to show you guys that. But so my point talking about it only having 4 stages, a lot of people, that's a complaint people will say, is that the game is so short and it's so easy. But I think what some people maybe don't realize is that with a lot of these early Game Boy games, they loop. And another one I could think of would be Kirby's Adventure loops, and it's a short game. So you play this game, you get to the end, and it's going to loop you back to the first level, but then it's going to be a little bit harder. So, you know, I guess you're kind of playing for high score, I suppose, because it's basically like, how many loops can you play before you finally get game over because the game gets too hard? So, but I mean, I know that's not as good as having a game that has like, you know, 8 or 9 different levels, but, you know, I don't know what the memory capacity of these early Game Boy games was. Obviously, it's easy to find that out by just, oh man, by just seeing how big a ROM file is for it. Seeing if I could find a mushroom. The other thing you may have noticed is that the 1-ups aren't mushrooms and instead they're hearts. And I would guess that that probably is just due to the fact that, considering sort of how low res, if you will, this game is, how would they differentiate between a 1-up and just a regular, like, you know, power mushroom? So it was easier just to make it be something else. But I don't know that for a fact. That's just conjecture on my part. So we're almost to the end of World 2-2 here, and then we can get into that shooter stage that I wanted to show you guys, and then that's probably enough. I mean, how much of this game do you really need to see? Oh man, well if I don't stop dying, then then it's gonna take longer, I guess. But I think we can go down into this one, yeah. And much like I think Super Mario Brothers, there's really only a few different configurations for this like underground coin screen, you know, which was always a single screen in these earlier games. And the only difference is, like, you know, there's the little secret block you have to hit to get out, and that sort of changes position. But other than that, it's pretty much the same. Okay, so now we're at the end of this stage. And I just want to point out, so you're supposed to jump on those 3 blocks to get up to that platform. And those blocks, as soon as you land on them, you have like a fraction of a second before they like fall. But as you could see, I just jumped over from that other little part. Because sometimes, just because, you know, the controls admittedly in this game are not as good as on an NES Mario Brothers game. And so sometimes it can be hard to jump on those things and not screw up, at least for me. I always make sure I stay away from that not fire flower, the whatever flower, just because you're always, as long as you stay away from that thing, you're always guaranteed to get at least 1 extra life. So now here's what I was talking about with the shooter stage. You can see that, you know, you've got Mario here in this little, you know, personal size submarine. And I don't know, I just thought it was cool because, you know, when did you ever see something like this in a Mario game? So, dang it. So I thought that was kind of neat. You know, maybe that's the kind of thing. I mean, I don't really know anything about, you know, the development of this game or what. I don't know if like Gunpei Yokoi's team had like, I'm sure they didn't have like free reign to just do whatever they wanted. I mean, they had to be respectful of the franchise, but you know, certainly they got to do, you know, stuff like this, and I think that's pretty cool. And I wish they had stages like this in other Mario games. Like, could you imagine something like this in like Super Mario World? Like, how cool would that be? Unless, you know, unless that isn't one of those games and I'm just completely forgetting about it and I'm just making myself look like a dope right now. But hopefully not. Oh man. And one thing, I don't know if you noticed or not, you know, you kind of don't have too much of rapid fire. You're limited to having 3 total projectiles on the screen at one time. So sometimes you can get yourself into trouble that way because you need to shoot somebody, you know, within some fraction of a second, but there's still 3 projectiles of yours on the screen. So then you're kind of screwed. But yeah, you know, I don't have to even guess. I know for sure that I never beat this game when I was a kid. And so that was pretty easy. It's a kid's game. But so I never beat this game when I was a kid. And, you know, as I mentioned, my Game Boy broke. And so I probably threw the Game Boy in the garbage because at that point, what were you going to do with it? And, you know, if I had to guess, I would say that my Game Boy games probably just got donated to the thrift store or something. But sometime in like late 2001 or early 2002, I bought a Game Boy Advance. That was before the SP came out, and it was just a regular Game Boy Advance with the screen that still wasn't backlit, which is why it took me so long to pick one up, is I was really not happy about the fact that the screen still didn't light up. Because so even then, I still had to, find some light source to sit next to play the games, And in fact, by then I was in college, and I had this spot on the couch in my apartment where if I just laid there a certain way, I had a lamp behind me, and then the games looked pretty good. And I remember like one of the early games that I got for the Game Boy Advance was Golden Sun. I played a lot of that. But to get back to original Game Boy stuff, when I got the Game Boy Advance, because it was, backwards compatible with these original Game Boy games, one of the first things I did was hop on eBay and like re-buy all the games that I had when I was a kid, like even the bad ones, just because, just because of the nostalgia factor, by then I had already been into retro gaming for quite some time, and so it was kind of a no-brainer that now that I once again had the ability to play old Game Boy games, that I was going to want to start buying up, old Game Boy games. And I figured, well, why not start with the games that I had when I was a kid? So, like the first two games that I bought off of eBay were, of course, Tetris and Super Mario Land here. And then, later I got the other ones. And so that was when I finally beat the game. Was when I got the games back again in college. I had kind of a job when I was a student. All right, that's enough of that. But so I had a job when I was a student where I did a lot of sitting around. Like I was sort of at a service window where somebody would come by if they needed anything, and so I could sit there and do my homework or do whatever. And once I got the Game Boy, I sat there and would play Tetris and would play Super Mario Land. And that was when I finally beat the game. So, even though I only had a working Game Boy for maybe a couple of years, and even though it wasn't sort of the presence in my gaming life that the NES was, because there wasn't that feeling of camaraderie around the Game Boy, I still have great memories of it. It was the only game system that I ever got on Christmas morning. I hear all these other people with their stories of, getting an NES on Christmas morning, or of course there's that famous video of that kid opening up the N64 on Christmas morning. And I didn't get any of that kind of stuff because, my NES was kind of like an early Christmas present, but, I got it in like October. So it wasn't something I opened up. And this was the only thing I ever got to open up on Christmas morning. Although, like I said, unfortunately, I peeked and already knew, which kind of ruined the surprise. But so I still have a lot of great memories and very nostalgic about the Game Boy. So I was looking forward to talking about it with you guys on this video. And there are a few other games that I picked up that we will talk about. And, I'll try to wrap that up with something else, because none of those games were like really marquee titles. So nobody wants to watch a flashback episode of me just talking about Solar Striker. But if I manage to make the episode about some sort of bigger topic and then include that, then I think it'll end up being okay. But that's going to do it for this episode of Flashback. And don't forget, if you want Classic Gaming Quarterly stickers, pretty cheap and pretty awesome. I was impressed with how they turned out anyway. And, just click the link down in the description if you want to get some of those. Or, I just got today a fresh batch of postcards. So if you want a postcard, just send us a postcard. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.